maybe the experience of Limassol can help create broader sustainability initiatives and within the country or even beyond, and even opportunities for collaboration. Are there any other cities?
Well, in fact, the Limassol municipality applied to this mission, and with the Limassol municipality, another three municipalities had applied. Of course, only Limassol municipality was selected, but one of the important aspects of participating in this mission is creating the sense of collaboration and transferability. And we did initiate the creation of the local network for climate neutral cities.
When you mean local, you mean national?
No, national, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So yes, a national network in which the first cities that applied to participate in the missions are part of this network, including the municipality of Strovolos, the municipality of Paphos, and the municipality of Aradipou. We have to say that, especially in the thematic of energy, these other three municipalities face difficulties in implementing different activities for reaching climate targets. And one of the first activities as a network is to kind of collaborate in the implementation of asking for this freedom to apply these regulatory sandboxes in all 4 municipalities, and specifically in the thematic of energy.
All right. Amazing to hear that there are spillover effects, and yeah. So as we continue to discuss about sandboxes, the term can conjure images of children's play, because we keep referring to sandboxes and sandboxes. However, in this context that we are exploring today, the regulatory sandboxes are far from a child's play. It seems that they are sophisticated tools with substantial implications. So I think now that we have the context of the mission, we have and Limassol, and we have the application, I think it's time to delve into the tool, to the actual tool. So let's hear it from our expert on the panel. I mean, Alexander, can you give us like a firm, a solid definition of exactly what is this regulatory sandbox tool and its its practical applications?
Sure. Regulatory sandboxes began in the financial sector because the financial sector realized that technology could solve a lot of global issues related to the Sustainable Development Goals, something that the cities are also trying to challenge from a different perspective. In practice, it is a learning mechanism both for the firms applying and for the authority that is doing it. So I think what I want to really raise, it's really a time-bound structured environment where some sort of temporary acceptance is given, which allows the authority then to learn and understand how to regulate something in the future. They are time-bound and they're controlled. They have now expanded beyond finance, exactly because where there's a lot of regulation, the understanding that an enabling environment for innovation is needed, needs a different regulatory innovation approach. And it's one of the tools. There's other tools, innovation hubs or information offices that give information, but a regulatory sandbox allows a financial authority, often a regulator, let's call it regulator, or someone who supervises, a supervisor, to give some sort of limited time frame with a limited testing environment to start something, and in the end, through this process, to understand how to regulate, and at graduation, provide the regulation. It should not be seen as an alternative to permanent regulation, where that is needed. And at the same time, it should not be underestimated that, for example, I love your example, Penelope, that let's say if the energy community starts under a regulatory sandbox, it would only be able to graduate when the law is in place. So the challenge and opportunity of an efficient regulatory sandbox really is in coordination And I think it's the opportunity to coordinate and make things go swifter, but also the challenge to be able to be effective.
I mean, it's amazing to hear that a tool developed for a specific field, it's now used in other fields. I mean, being a physicist, I mean, in my scientific domain, this is quite often. I mean, MRI began at CERN on a completely different application. The World Wide Web was actually developed again in CERN from some physicists that they just wanted to exchange data between them. So it's amazing to see that the science of finance is giving, for example, the combat against climate change some powerful tools. So let me just, before going to the next question, so Alexandre, as a researcher in this field of regulatory sandboxes, could you highlight any recent findings and emerging trends from your work that shed light on the effectiveness of the regulatory sandboxes?
Of course, and they are quite important for the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, we've seen great success in Kenya with mobile payments that help financial inclusion. So they are, if you want, in the realm of the issues that worry the municipalities as well. And you asked for some particular examples, if you said, well, I find regulatory sandboxes to be very successful when they have a clear objective, enough resources, both in financial but also technical expertise, because, for example, in the example of energy communities, you need someone to understand the technical issues that might arise. The evidence of demand, people do want to have an energy community, for example, and the ability to be flexible, for example, in frameworks. If the sandbox understands that the law that is coming into place has a particular problem, can it then inform the policymakers to make that change before the law is in place? I think when those are in place and with high level participation and agreement, you can have a very successful sandbox that actually looks at the risks that the commissioner mentioned. I think we should not see it as a way to avoid understanding the risk. Actually, it's a learning process where those risks can be identified faster before the projects are implemented. And then at graduation, you say, great, if you want to continue, you need to do A, B, C, D.
I think the issue of risks and hitting a balance, it's quite interesting, and I think let's discuss this during the course of the panel. But since now we have this very clear description of the tool, I think it's good if we delve deeper into the deployment of this tool into climate initiatives, and I'll turn to Bob. Bob, what tangible advantages do regulatory sandboxes offer within the context of climate initiatives?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I believe that to understand the benefits and the advantages of regulatory sandboxes, we need to think of what used to make good policy. And what used to make good policy is that it is firm, that it is that it doesn't have any backdoors, that it is equal for all over the whole country, and preferably sustainable in time. But in these times, with accelerating shocks, whether it is from climate, from finances, or from health, you also need to have an additional element of flexibility and agility. And so the big question, and if you ask me, it's one of the most interesting questions that there is at the moment in policy making, that is how to add this type of resilience to these shocks into the existing system of sustainable policy making. And one of the things that you add, and I completely agree that it is not from the subsidiarity principle, that it is about shifting power from the national level to the local level. It is about creating an openness to experiment and to see whether something works or not before applying it for the whole country. And I think that is one of the biggest advantages. But then also, on the other hand, you see that there's a rising demand on the local scale of citizens. Citizens have increasing demands of what they expect from their government, from their local government. Local governments are the first to be confronted with these shocks, whether it is a migration shock, whether it is a forest fire, whether it is a flood. It is always the local government who needs to act the first. And if there's no flexibility in the system, the malcontentment of the citizens will reflect on the national government. So there's an equal interests that there is both flexibility built into a steady system, and also groups. I'm sorry, because I'm very passionate about this, because I've experienced this on the local level. Can you
give us some instances that from your own experiences?
Well, from my own experience, I used as deputy mayor in a small city in Belgium, so nothing compared to a big city as Limassol. But we had a very inspired team of only 3 experts on the issue of energy, and we developed a democratic support system for wind turbines. We were able to build 22 wind turbines with the consent of the whole community, which is unique in whole of Europe. And we did this with some special tweaks in the regulation. But then when it came to implementation, we hit some regulatory walls, let's say. And it is not about us as local community wanting all of the control for ourselves. No, it was an invitation to the national government saying, hey, look at this. It might be interesting to apply for the rest of the country, and why not try it? And if you want to be an enabling government that is collaborating, that is not something that is far away, an institution that is far away from what's happening in municipalities, but you need to do this. You need to have this openness installed in your governance system.
Amazing. So the regulatory sandboxes, they act as a bridge, and they fill this gap until the legislation authority develops the actual legislation, and it provides this flexibility in the room for creating innovation, whether this be technology, whether this be policies or what have you. But it's interesting to hear that it also acts as a catalyst for decentralization. And empowering local communities to go on with their planning and their own initiatives, rather than being controlled and confined by the government, the central legislation.
Partially, because I agree with the fact that the goal needs to be central. If the goal on itself is decentralization, it's about the power issue. It is who is doing what at what level. It shouldn't be about that. It should be just the openness of how can we achieve this goal collectively in the best way. And I'm convinced that this approach will also help to close the legitimacy gap that you see growing all over Europe, where local people are increasingly mistrusting national governments because of this disconnection with the local sphere. Yeah.
That's great to hear. So I'm just gonna come back to the issue of risks, because it is a discussion, and we need to have someone looking over the issues that may arise from this. So I'm going to turn to Theodolos now to maybe elaborate a bit on these inherent risks that come from flexibility and the reduced compliance burden, right? That regulatory sandbox by definition propose, and maybe if you have an idea of how can we strike an equilibrium and how we can balance and make sure that these risks are controlled and mitigated.
Of course, thank you very much for your question. as the Commissioner said, the first thing that comes to our mind is the risks for the environment. And I've heard a lot of things, and it's great to have regulatory sandboxes to create innovation. But I would like just to stress something, that the first thing that comes in my mind right now is artificial intelligence. While regulatory sandboxes are being used right now from financial companies for big data in finance. And what we have to think is that an AI system like, let's say, ChatGPT uses about 50 billion transistors just to be used. And for a very simple calculation, it uses from 2 to 4 billion transistors. So someone can imagine what it uses vast amounts of energy. So while big data are used in finance for fraud detection, financial forecasting, credit scoring, etc., they pose huge risks, environmental risks, because we might come out with solutions that they might help us in the short term or long term, but in the long term they will create more problems. And let's say that all of these things, they use data. So from what we know, 90% of data being stored right now has been accumulated in the past 2 years. So it's just to store those data requires enormous energy amounts. And what we are trying to do to achieve the net carbon zero target is to use alternative resources of energy. And again, we create a problem, because as to year 2050, it's estimated that there will be 50 million tons of waste from blades from wind turbines, and 50 million tons of waste of solar panels that we wouldn't know how to use them. And of course, we don't want to halt innovation. What we want to do is blend innovation with close monitoring, so that we know what's going on. And I want to bring on some more examples that didn't emerge from sandboxes, but why we need this close monitoring. Like DDT, it was discovered in 1874, and it was its insecticidal properties were discovered in 1939. So they were vastly used in the World War II to control vector-borne diseases and in agricultural use, and they were banned almost 100 years ago in 1972 in the United States. But because of their environmental impacts. But what we can see right now is that DDT is still used to control malaria in various countries, but it's working under the World Health Organization, which created a framework to how to protect the environment, and has regulations on how to use it. There are other examples like CFC in refrigeration, asbestos, etc. So the key, as we said, is close monitoring. We have to set strict environmental benchmarks. We have to have in the process environmental experts, because most of the times the teams that work in regulatory sandboxes don't have all the experts needed to create something. And after they create something, they come out and they say, oops, we have a problem. So it creates financial risk as well, etc. So it's...
So you're proposing allowing flexibility and allowing this reduction of regulatory compliance, but with close monitoring,
yeah,
and
we don't want to hold back innovation. What we need is to support innovation in the correct way, because through innovation we might come out with batteries that store more energy, so it's better, with other solutions for power supply that are more environmental friendly. We can come to other pesticides that are friendly from the environment, I wanted to say. So it's, we need more experts to be involved in the process, and we need to have benchmarking and monitoring.
Well, I will also argue that and drawing inspiration from the forum, from the forum's focus in this year, which is transparency, I would argue that there must be an effective collaboration between the regulators and the innovators. And in order to have effective collaboration, I deem you need to have also transparent guidelines and these benchmarks that you mentioned, etc. There must be transparent guidelines. I don't know if anyone resonates with this approach.
If I may answer, I mean, what we are trying to do is incorporate the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and what we are trying to do is do it under the ESG, environmental social governance. And one of the most important things, I've been asked several times, which one is more important, the environmental, the social, or the governance part? And I told them that I believe that it's the governance part, because within the governance, you have the regulations, you have the policies, you have everything. If you have good and transparent governance within your company, then you will set everything up, and you will come to everything that's needed to make what needs to be done. If someone else wants to ask something.
I would like to add something. I think I wouldn't differentiate from governance and the other parts. I would go that all three of them are equivalent, and they need to kind of be worked at the same time. But I think that, yes, adding, as you said, in the thematic of this year's Cyprus Forum, it's all about transparent guidelines, and we are very aware of that, and we acknowledge that we need to have monitoring processes in place. We need to have reporting requirements of how everything is progressing. We need to allow for all stakeholders involved to have accessibility to the data collected in order for them to have so there's informed decision making. We need to have consistencies in the way we implement things in order to have comparisons between them. And of course, we need to adapt when this data comes and we come to some sort of resolution. We need to decide how to move forward and adjust. Yes, I think always with transparency, you can get the feedback, and you need to give feedback in order to proceed. So I think it is one aspect. I wanted to add before, just to make sure that I answered appropriately. You asked me about the legislation regarding energy communities. Yeah. And no, it's not in place, but it's being designed. It's been developed. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we know that locally there are efforts made to create this legislation, but the process is going slow.
Yeah, even if it's still being developed,
exactly.
It's not there. So this is where the
regulatory.
Just wanted to
clarify.
Thank you for the clarification. So it's evident that the regulatory sandboxes are tools that they step in lack of legislation, whether there is a legislation in the pipeline or for the correction of an existing legislation. Just want to put Eleftherios in the discussion as well from the Directorate of Growth and ask whether we have any instances, any examples of regulatory sandboxes in Cyprus, whether this be at climate initiatives or in any other field.
Good morning. This is a very new concept for Cyprus, so there has not been much. I mean, the only initiative that actually exists is from the Cyprus Stock Exchange Committee. They have issued a tender to find a consultant to design a sandbox, a special sandbox for financial purposes. And that's a kind of a continuation of their innovation hub. So now they have awarded this tender to a consulting company, and they have started the design of the sandbox. But that's the only initiative that actually exists in Cyprus for the moment. Yeah. But I would like to add that as a Director in General for Growth, responsible for the sustainable development in Cyprus, both for sustainable development goals and for the national energy and climate planning of the country, we see that Cyprus has a lot of particularities as a member state of the EU. We're an isolated country from the rest of Europe. We're the only country that is not connected with an electric cable to the rest of the European Union. We have a very small market, so we have very specific challenges we have to face, both to progress in the climate goals and to the innovation and to the sustainable development goals. Unfortunately, Cyprus is far behind from the rest of Europe. We need this innovation not just to solve the global issues on climate, but also the particular issues of the country. So we see that the sandbox can help to have this kind of innovation for very specific solutions for Cyprus.
We must acknowledge though that it's such a new tool, and in Cyprus we're not very early adopters. We're not known to be early adopters, so it's amazing to even have an instance, an example of such tool being deployed, even in finance, and we hope to have more soon. However, Alexander, you want to say something? I mean, just want to say that since Eleftheriou touched upon it, I mean, we must acknowledge that we live in a country that hope, because everybody hopes and everybody has visions, etc. But hope coexists with skepticism, and trusting new initiatives can be, challenging. So I just wanted to ask that in this context, how do you envision to address these concerns and championing the regulatory sandbox? I mean, it's a panel discussion, and I have seen that apart from highlighting the risks involved, you are all like poised and you are all very positive on these things. I'm sure that there will be skepticism from people what are you doing here? Are you opening up the legislation? How are you going to control it? And is this another trick? Is this another way for you to give power to capitalists, etc.? I don't know if anyone has any idea. I mean, Alexander and maybe Eleftherios.
Can I add something on this? I mean, from a government point of view, it's difficult to convince that this thing is the correct way to go, because government has some very bureaucratic procedures, and also the parliament has certain bureaucracy, and relaxing their rules is not something that government bodies are used to. So there should be a line that we can do this, and that's the way to go, and probably by seeing good practices from other countries, or by seeing that European Union also is promoting these sandboxes, could be the way to convince the government way of thinking that relaxing their rules, even for a short period of time, is the way to go.
And to add to that, in a practical example, you need to actually generate success. So we have seen sandboxes that were well-funded that had zero applications. Zero applications means zero exit. You have to have successful exits. You cannot have a firm that starts, let's say, the energy environment, and then it takes 7 years for the law to go through Parliament, then they're stuck for those 7 years. So I think if it's a trusted organization, which I think the municipalities can be, because they're, absolutely agree with you, Bob, there's closer to the base, then it can work. But they need to be very, very clear. I just wanted to also raise, Konstantinos, if I can, what I really loved I loved Bob's answer for many things, but what I really love is also showing what we said is the principles for success. There was expertise. There was demand from the local population. There was a very clear objective, let's find alternative energy needs. And there, a regulatory sandbox could provide a testing ground for the national level. So for me, what sounds from your example, Bob, and thank you for sharing it, it shows exactly, if you want, the basic pillars that you need to have there to actually generate success. And I wanted to add it because it links, I think it's success that makes a sandbox actually survive or not achieve its purpose.
I very much resonate. I actually had so you're proposing, instead of articulating the mechanics of the sandboxes and trying to, do public awareness, engage campaigns, just show a successful example. I mean, these people are representatives, and in many cases are elected representatives. And this is what we were discussing with Bob earlier. So they are mandated to just a small, maybe naive question. In Cyprus, do we need any change in the constitution or what have you to have regulatory sandboxes? So do we need like a clause somewhere to be able to say that, okay, here we don't abide by the rules?
That's a great question. It depends on the tools the sandbox has.
Okay.
So if you're going to give some sort of temporary license, which is exactly what Eleftherios was mentioning, that will definitely have to go through a legal review, and it would have to be time-bound. So it depends on what tools you will have. But there are other tools, like a letter of no objection. For example, where regulators get together and they say, this is an innovative project, we don't know how to regulate it, we allow it to start, we will regulate you in the future, possibly doesn't need legal. So it depends on the tools you give your sandbox to be able to be successful.
Right.
But timing is very important. Thank you for mentioning it. It's on the record, but I shouldn't say it. Sandboxes live and die if they can generate results for innovative companies. Because if it takes 3 years to graduate, then that's not innovation. The company itself will not choose to even enter the market if it doesn't know it has a solution or how it will be regulated within 3 months, I would say, not 6 and not years, right?
Alex, speaking about timing, I saw the glorifying timekeeper informing me that our time is up. I mean, it's been an amazing conversation. Before we finished, I promised, and I think now it's a time to give the voice to the audience. If there are any questions. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. My name is Hadjilyra, professor of planning law. I'm just here by accident. I heard about the conference. I'm here in Cyprus on vacation. I registered it. So excellent discussion. It's the same in Germany. We call it laboratory, legal laboratory. And this is exactly what I can give an advice. It's better to implement something in the constitution. I would exactly follow this, a basic open power to the municipalities. Yeah, it's always good to have a constitution because we call legal hierarchy and we struggle a lot of getting goals from the national to the local level. It's an enormous problem. But I have a question, if I may, to Penelope. I'm a planning law and on the urban ground, and we often see local landowners are not happy with regulations. If I went at Limassol and I saw the skyscrapers, and I think they are not environmentally friendly. We value these, and this is a nightmare. So how do you convince local landowners? Is there an example because landowners say no, it's a free market. What do you want, government? Yeah, more than often. So a good example is absolutely a winning topic in that regard. But thank you for this discussion. Very important. We struggle the same in Germany, I can tell you.
So the question is, how do we get landowners to collaborate?
Or developers, let's say big developers. I found Cyprus is maybe divided by developers. Yeah? They have hundreds of land plots. How do you convince them to collaborate with you?
I think that initially, as an architect also, I would like to comment that high-rise buildings don't always mean non-environmental. It depends how you design them and how do you place them in the context of the city. In Limassol specifically, it has its weaknesses, let's say, but yes. Now, specifically regarding the question, something that is very important is to really be honest during the participatory processes followed. Decision-making shouldn't be a one-way, shouldn't be top to bottom. It shouldn't be only bottom-up. There should be participation in all 3 levels of the different groups that affect the citizens, and that is the government, like national government, local government, and citizens. So all 3, they need to create a framework, and at least this is what we're trying to create, a framework by which these 3, let's say, bubbles collaborate constantly for the decision making. For a long time, there has been a top-to-bottom approach, and it has been acknowledged that this doesn't work. This it fails, because then citizens do not embrace decisions made for them. At the same time, asking simply citizens what they want is not enough for the top. So what we are trying to create through the mission is this triangle of these, the national government, the local government, and the citizens. And when I say citizens, I mean stakeholders and companies and non-governmental, anyone, and landowners, yes, to kind of exchange and create the conditions for conversation in order when the decision is made, it can be embraced by these landowners so they can own the decision. I hope I'm, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add just a thing that, especially on the landowners, in my previous position, I was also responsible for spatial planning. And in that sense, I completely agree that once you open up the window of regulatory sandboxes, that you run the risk of becoming like an organization with some sort of demand-driven lawmaking, which, especially when the demand is coming from the commercial sector, other groups in society which don't have the same strong voice as these developers, these landowners, will get pushed aside. So we need to be very careful where to open the topic, on which scale to open the topic, and depending on that, I think also one of the things that is needed is to look out for success is the amount of scalability that's involved in the goal that is set in by forehand. So especially on the landowners, we know that you can't create a regulatory sandbox for every skyscraper you want to build, because then you'll get like an Atlantic or a Mediterranean wall in your city. So it needs to have a right of balancing the demand in the short term, and also how this demand in the short term can lead to long-term benefits for the climate goals or whatever policy goals that you might have as a government.
And make the law better in the end, the local law.
Yes.
In the best way.
Exactly, yeah.
So I don't know if there are any other.
Any successful sandbox needs high-level participation and control. In the design of a sandbox, there's two really critical weaknesses you need to solve: coordination between regulators, which is always very difficult, and the second is high-level access. These people are regulators. They're not used to working with firms for a common goal. So unless there's high-level support, it's very difficult.
We need to stop. Thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for the insights, for the discussion. Well, we will be here for the entire day, so we can continue the discussion afterwards.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that because we will have this, we will try to push for the regulatory sandboxes in Cyprus through the mission Limassol. You can always find us on LinkedIn or follow us and observe how we're proceeding. We try to communicate our steps, and always contact us for any suggestions or, yes, thank you.